Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Rain, and this is my companion, Honey Wolf. And I want to share with you a craft that I just recently learned, which is how to weave with yucca and make something that looks a little bit like this. Banana leaf yucca is an incredible desert plant. It has a very strong fibrous structure, which makes it amazing for weaving and also for making cordage. Now, first things first, we want to harvest the leaves that are free of any rot or bug damage, because that kind of damage will actually compromise the fiber, which can potentially make it a bit more brittle and easier to break while weaving. Notice how I cut the tip of the leaf off first before reaching in to cut it at the base. This is because the tips are quite pokey and it's really easy to get yourself when you're working with it. Now, you only need about 10 to 20 leaves in order to have enough material for a small basket, but being the way that I am, I decided to harvest over 100 to hopefully have enough material to make a nice sun hat. That is, assuming I can ever find the free time to actually finish processing it all. So, let's get started. Using your blade of choice, first thing you want to do is cut the edges off each leaf. And I find it easiest to use a razor blade because it's a very precise tool. Now, you want to go in about maybe half a centimeter from the edge, because the edges actually taper out, or rather taper in as you get to the end of the leaf. And so starting in the middle, you go down about half a centimeter and make a straight cut out to the tip, and then back to the base of the leaf, and then you do the same on the other side. Just to give you all a bit of backstory, I just recently learned this craft from a man down in the Southwest who is truly living the old ways, living almost entirely off of wild foods or foods that he's cultivated, and oftentimes out in the wilderness. And he is definitely as elusive as his namesake. He goes by the name Wind and is an incredibly gifted and bright and brilliant human. And I feel very fortunate to have gotten to spend a couple weeks with him when I was down in the Southwest this year. And I won't say more because I want to respect his privacy, but I brought it up because I feel it's important to honor the lineage of where we learn these kinds of skills from. And so, continuing on, once you get the edges off the leaf, you want to make a clean cut down the center of the leaf, and you'll find that the fibrous structure of the leaf will actually kind of guide the blade. Once we get the leaf separated into two pieces, we can go ahead and start to scrape the plant matter off of each side of the leaf, which basically exposes the fibrous structure of the leaf itself, which we will then begin to separate into groups or individual strands. And I gotta say, this part for me is quite satisfying. One of the reasons I really like to use a razor blade for this is because I found that using the back edge of the blade is actually a really efficient way to remove the skin of the leaf without dulling the edge of the blade that you're using. Also, when choosing a piece of wood to scrape the leaves against, I found it helpful to have something with a gentle radius to it in order to be able to scrape the skin off the edges of the leaf. Once you get all that green plant matter scraped off the leaf, you can go ahead and start separating them into individual strands. Now, for the basket that I wove, and what Wind taught us, is to separate them into pretty small strips, probably no more than 1/8 of an inch thick. But with these, I was actually going a bit thicker because I have specific intentions to hopefully make some sort of sun hat like you see me wearing in this video. And I figured if I separate them into larger strands, that it might make the weaving project go a little bit faster. But if there's one thing that I've learned, there is no way around it. It just takes a whole lot of time, especially the processing of the leaves themselves. To be perfectly honest, I actually haven't even finished getting through that whole stack that you see there. Just been working on it in my free time and chipping away, but it definitely takes a lot of patience. But honestly, I kind of love having crafts like this where it's really monotonous and you're just doing the same thing over and over, and in a way kind of mindless, and you can really just drop into the flow of the craft itself. I find it to be pretty meditative and peaceful. Now you probably noticed that I had a couple different colors in the basket that I had woven. The reddish color that you see actually comes from the red dock or canagre that you saw me process in the last video. And you can definitely experiment with the different plant dyes that you might have available to you. And having different colored fibers is fun for the weaving part of the process, where you can actually create different patterns. So after we separate the leaves into individual strands, our next step will be to soak them for about 10 to 15 minutes. And that's because the leaves of the yucca plant actually hold natural soaps or saponins, which, fun fact, we can use this plant to wash our bodies with. But we don't want these soaps in the fibers that we just separated out, which, to be perfectly honest, I'm not entirely sure why. Wynn didn't really explain too in depth on why we want to do this, but my guess is that they probably don't store very well with the saponins in the fibers, and I think it also makes it easier to weave with. Maybe potentially keeps it from getting too weak or brittle, or maybe keeps it from rotting. Once they're fully rehydrated, you can go ahead and wring them out and just kind of dunk them in for a moment and keep going. And you'll notice the sudsy, kind of like green chlorophyll colored water coming out. And we want to keep going until we get as much of that out as we can, which takes quite a while. I think I spent about 30 minutes or so wringing out this bundle and didn't even fully get all the soaps out. I was still getting some suds out towards the end of that, but I figured, that's probably good enough. I don't know if you noticed the color difference between the bundles as I was doing the time lapse and separating out the individual strands, but the one on the left there is quite a bit more bright green than the one on the right, and that is because the one on the right is a bundle that I've already wrung out previously, and I think that the color change once it's dried out after wringing can be a good indicator of whether or not you've removed enough of the saponins. And so you just keep wringing. You want to get as much of those soaps out as you can, and at some point you'll probably notice that you're getting a lot less sudsy water coming out. It will become a bit more clear, and at that point you might be pretty safe to call it good. And once you have them all wrung out, you can go ahead and lay them out to dry, and that's it for processing the material down and getting them ready to weave. And if you're wanting to experiment with dyeing some of the fibers so that you have different colors to work with when you weave, I would definitely recommend drying them out first, and then when you make a tea for a dye, I would try to use something that is naturally tannic or high in tannic acid. The tannins actually help act as a mordant, and which essentially helps the fibers retain the color that you're trying to get. So look for stuff that has tannins naturally, or if you're making a tea with a plant dye that isn't naturally tannic, maybe think about adding a plant to the tea that is high in tannins. And that's it for the processing of the yucca. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned. When I have a moment, I'm gonna dive into the weaving project, and I am excited to share that with y'all because it is definitely the fun part, if you ask me. So if you enjoyed this video and you want to learn more, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you on the next one.